Welcome to the Big Fundamental Podcast, a San Antonio Spurs podcast brought to you by Kins 5, the official station of the San Antonio Spurs. I'm Jackson Floyd. Joining me today, we have Evan Klosky.
What up?
And Tom Petrini.
How's it going, guys?
Guys, I just want to take care of some unfun stuff off the top here. This week we lost a legend, Elgin Baylor, one of, I think, maybe one of the more unheralded legends. Before YouTube, a lot of highlights of him weren't available, but the Los Angeles Laker was kind of ahead of his game, ahead of the time there, and how he played the game. Evan, do you have any thoughts on Elgin Baylor? Any memories that stick out to you on him?
I mean, he's just a tremendous basketball player, so well respected. Pop, I think, said it best when it was just like during his time, and of course, Pop was watching him kind of growing up there. Much younger. I shouldn't say growing up, but he was a much younger age. And just watching him and understanding that he was so above his class, like what he was doing on the basketball court was just something that anybody has ever seen before. And when he died, I had to go back and just look at some of his statistics. And I find it hilarious that he had a season where he averaged 38 points and 19 rebounds. I mean, and the season prior to that, he averaged 35 points and 20 rebounds. I mean, this guy was he was the varsity, everybody else was the JV, and the best of the best during that time had no chance against this dude. So, as far as silly statistics go and just looking at the raw numbers, it kind of reminds you of just how dominant he was, and a sad day for basketball fans and just everybody. I obviously wasn't alive watching him, but our parents and people who were younger idolizing him. It sucks.
I mean, 11-time NBA All-Star, and he was the general manager of the Clippers for 22 years. So this guy, I mean, that's 33 years right there of, pretty high profile work in a tough industry. And I mean, some of those numbers that he was putting up, it's like Wilt, where it's like, are we really sure that this happened? There were no cameras back then. We just have one little rinky-dink newspaper account to this. Are we sure? But I mean, you can go back and look at the tape. I mean, I think his game would have translated. You're right, Jackson. He was ahead of his time on the court. So yeah, definitely a big loss for the basketball community.
Is that Keldon Johnson's ceiling, Elgin Baylor? 35 points, 20 rebounds.
After his 2020 game, the ceiling's the roof, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, hold
Why
on.
not?
I got something for you guys.
Big body. Big.
Where did you find this?
Big body.
The internet's undefeated. No, that comes from Spurs Twitter, Spurs Reddit. I'm sorry, the Spurs Reddit.
You showed me that this morning, and I was drinking coffee, and I almost spit up my coffee. I was I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Yeah,
and I was just in such shock.
Yeah, we've got a fun little video. We might have to post it to the Twitter after we record today. But I
think you should.
We had a beautiful song for a beautiful man there. Just one of our favorite Spurs, most exciting Spurs to watch there. Big 2020 weekend for him. I think that kind of the cap you would say on this road trip. I would say this road trip went better than we expected. 3-2 on the 5 games stand there, and they were without DeMar for a big chunk of those games. Tom, what did you take away from the road trip stretch we saw there?
I think in the 3 games that they won at the end, we just forget about Philly, where not many teams in the league would have beat Philly on that night. They go into Detroit, get a solid game from DeJounte Murray, win that one. He has 19 points, 6 assists to lead the team in both categories. Next game, Jakob Poeltl puts up 20 and 16. That was his, and I mean, in a ridiculous huge comeback against the Bulls. Game after that, Keldon Johnson, 23 points, 21 rebounds. First Spur to do a 2020 game since Tim Duncan had the same numbers in 2013. And then they go to Milwaukee, and Lonnie Walker IV has 31 points, career high. So we saw a lot from the different young guys on this road trip that kind of made you say, wow. Not just in the box score, right? It was how they did it. It was how they put up those numbers that really impressed me. So, even that loss to Milwaukee, right? That was a scheduled L. You saw it on the schedule. You knew that was going to happen, weeks ago.
The Spurs went ahead and rested DeJounte Murray and Patty Mills for that game too. So
they weren't. I mean, they didn't even have their whole roster. And honestly, if Derek White doesn't have his worst game of his career, they're in that. And I mean, Lonnie Walker. A lot of people got pissed at me on Twitter because I said that was Lonnie Walker's ceiling. I'm not saying that Lonnie Walker is never going to score 31 again. I'm saying the type of performance that he had, that's his ceiling. Shooting 15 times a game and getting his looks from deep and inside and scoring at 3 levels. That's kind of the guy that you want, on a consistent basis. That's the guy that you want. And to be fair, up until the Hornets game where, he's out against the Clippers, his wrist has been hurting him. Honestly, his wrist has been hurting him the entire year, and he's been gutting through it. I'm not surprised that that's probably part of his struggles, but not even giving that as an excuse, before that Hornets game, 11 out of the last 12 games, he scored in double digits. He's starting to find rhythm and getting himself points. But yeah, I mean, going through that road trip, I thought there were a lot of ups, there were a lot of downs. And it was really just kind of oscillating between exceptional play and exceptionally bad play. Even in Cleveland, right? It was wow, the Spurs are whooping on the Cavs. And then all of a sudden they would play 5 minutes of trash. And then right when the Cavs would get it close, boom, 3 minutes of exceptional play. And then the Cavs would get it close. And boom. So it was just and I felt like that was the whole road trip, The Bulls game, another great example. First half, the worst piece of basketball I've ever seen from the Spurs. I cannot remember a time that the San Antonio Spurs looked that bad. It was horrific. I mean, we were all all of us were joking on Twitter with Spurs. I mean, me, Tom, you, Jackson, all the fans that we engage with, we were like, what the hell are we – what are we watching? It's so bad I can't look away. But, we all stuck through it, and they played just remarkable basketball. So, you take the good, you evaluate the bad, and, that's just kind of where they're at right now, where they're just kind of – they keep dipping and diving into great basketball and subpar basketball.
We hear a lot about playing a 48-minute game, right? And that's something that they haven't been able to do, and it's cost them, right? Some of them they can figure it out, Cleveland, Chicago, they figured those games out. They should have figured out the Charlotte game, but they didn't.
Yeah.
If you're playing against the Clevelands and Charlottes of the world, it's one thing, but if you're playing against a better team, you really can't afford to give them a quarter where they just completely destroy you on both ends.
Yeah.
So something they need to work on.
Yeah, thinking back to the Dallas game from a few weeks ago, right, kind of fell in that same mold. That was one where they had it in the bag until the fourth quarter when Luka kind of took over for a while there. And of course, you're not going to always get a first half like you did from Luka Doncic in that game. I thought the defense in the Pistons and in the Cavaliers game was really strong. I mean, they on 3 of those 5 games, they held teams to 110 or below. And then the Bulls and the Pistons were in double digits there, just 99 points for them. Do we want to turn our attention to that Hornets game then? Because, they start a 9-game homestand in that game with that game on Monday night. And it's a stretch where, they've never had a stretch that long before. It's a historic stretch. the Hornets had just lost LaMelo Ball, one of two prominent injuries that kind of make basketball less fun, right? When the preemptive Rookie of the Year favorite it falls out, and then LeBron James kind of rolling his ankle with a high ankle sprain over the weekend too. The MVP frontrunner falls out. Yeah, basketball is just takes a notch down there, but still without LaMelo Ball, the Spurs do drop to the Hornets on Monday night, and what should have been a winnable game only scored 97 points that game, which is surprising. So.
Look, they didn't have it offensively. Rudy, terrible game. Keldon, not a great game. I'm missing one. DeJounte.
DeJounte could have had a better game too.
Not one of his better games. So the Spurs are a team of depth. All right, they can handle a guy here, a guy there, having off nights. But first off, DeJounte is an engine for this team. When DeJounte is either not in the court, which hasn't been much this season, but when he's on the court, or if he's not having a great game, the Spurs are going to struggle. They are. I mean, that just goes to speak to how important DeJounte is now. The other thing is the San Antonio Spurs are not good enough to allow teams to score points off turnovers. San Antonio is the best team at protecting the basketball. They're also one of the best teams in transition as well. They limit your opportunities to get easy buckets. That is why they're right on the cusp of a top 5 defense. The defense, honestly, in my opinion, was pretty darn good against the Hornets. Charlotte got loose for some threes, but overall, if you remove the 20-some-odd points that the Hornets got off of turnovers, I mean, you're holding them to 90 if you just cut that in half. So, and you win that game easily. So, I don't think – look, there are two factors when the Spurs lose a close game that seem to always pop up. It's the points off turnovers, and it's the offensive rebounding. I also don't think they did a great job on the glass again. One of their weaker nights when I was looking at the numbers on cleaning the glass. So those are two things that are their Achilles heels in close losses. And that's all it comes down to. I don't think it's anything bigger than that. I don't think there's a big problem. We know that the San Antonio Spurs are not an offensive juggernaut, and they're going to sometimes struggle from the field. They just are. And that night they need to win with defense. And they did a pretty darn good job. They needed to do a better job protecting the ball, and they would have won that game.
I mean, what stood out to me too was just, like you said, the offensive performance. Just 2 players scored more than 10 points. You're not going to win many games when just 2 players score more than 10. DeRozan had 28. Derek White rebounding from what was his worst performance of the season, like you said, and just taking a lot of ire and some of the fire on social media after that. 5 for 9 from 3, which was helpful. Tom, you pointed out that he scored a 3 to begin each quarter, right? That's a good way to start for him. Talk about his rebounding game, his rebound there.
Yeah, I mean, he came out from the rip aggressive, and was a driving force for them in this game. They really just needed a little bit more out of a couple of guys, and they could have won this. Excuse me. One of those days, guys. Mondays. Oh,
Yeah.
You feel me?
As we record on a Wednesday.
Ooh, that's spicy. I mean, overall, Charlotte played well, even though they didn't shoot the ball particularly well because the Spurs defense played pretty well. Scarence Terrence. I mean,
Scarence Terrence.
That's his full government. He is good. Yeah, he's a good basketball player. He was getting to the line, super duper crafty. Gordon Hayward getting buckets every single time the Spurs got back in the game a little bit. He was there to just push him back. We hear a lot about how this team misses DeMar DeRozan and his scoring when he's out. They do. He makes it easier for everybody. He's a distributor and, so much more than just the buckets he gets. Spurs definitely missed Lonnie Walker in this game. He only played the first half. You mentioned he's been dealing with the wrists. It's gotten to a point with his wrists where he looks like he can't or really doesn't want to fall on them. and that presents its own challenges, right? Because, in that 31-point game, he went in for a layup and got like kind of bumped into by Keldon Johnson. And like, I know Keldon's a big burly guy, but it didn't look like enough to knock somebody over. But it was kind of one of those things where once he was kind of falling, he was like, oh God, no, I'm going to fall. And I don't want to fall on my hands. And then he took a spill and was like, damn it, Jackson.
Have it at the ready. Anytime we need to talk about big body here.
We need a more productive soundboard. We need a soundboard with more than just this.
No, this is the only soundboard we got. It's a one-trick pony.
I got one more for you guys. I got one more sound for you guys. Hold on.
A big body.
I'm sorry. Go on. Lonnie Walker's wrists.
Yeah, no, but so he got bounced down by big body there, and if you're falling and you can't land on your wrists, that presents challenges for your arms and your elbows and shoulders. And so Pop taking him out of the Charlotte game, you guys know me, I've advocated for more play for Lonnie Walker. There were a lot of people who were like, oh, if Pop just plays Lonnie Walker down the stretch in this game, and I get it, but this was a put him in bubble wrap, I'm protecting you from yourself type of benching from Pop, who said earlier in the week that he was banged up. So, I think they should take as much time as they need to get him right, because he is an important player. I think even coming off the bench, especially coming off the bench.
I think you're nailing that on the head there, though. In terms of not wanting to fall on your wrists, that means you're backing down on the aggression, right? And Lonnie Walker is his best self when he's aggressive Lonnie. When he's aggressive Lonnie, I mean, he's almost like a skinny big body, right? He's charging to the lane. He's doing these high flying dunks. They're very complimentary players in that sense. I'm not going to play the song, even though I mentioned it. I know Evan was gearing up for it, but
it's such a bummer though, because like he was just figuring out the mental part, right? He's always had the physical part of being able to run and jump and fly and do all of that. And, the jumper's good, and it's just decision-making and aggression with him. And he was, really showing the combination of that with his undeniable physical talent. And now his body's like, hey, bud, please be real careful with me right now. I don't want to fall.
Yeah.
So that's a huge bummer and a bit of a stumbling block for sure.
I would just rest him a few games. I'm sure that Lonnie wants to play. That's why he's been playing all season long. Again, this is not an injury that just sprouted up. We've known about this injury for what? I mean, this happened in like the first month of basketball, towards like the end of that first month. So this is, he's always had that wrap on his wrist. And I'm sure that some days it feels better than others. But, yeah, this team is built on depth. Take a few plays off, sit, and, there are tons of capable dudes who can fill in for Lonnie. I don't think that missing Lonnie is going to completely alter the trajectory of where the Spurs are going this season if they just give him his due time. And it's only fair to Lonnie, too, because, I don't want to see Lonnie at 50%. That's not fair. Like he's busting his tail, and he's got to showcase his talents. His second contract's going to be coming closer too. So he's just only going to be working against himself, and that's a tough spot to be in.
Are we going to get sued for playing that song? I think we're in the clear.
No, because it's a parody.
Oh, okay, all right, we're good.
Yeah, parodies are all good.
Well, they're going to hold Lonnie out tonight. He's on the injury report alongside Rudy Gay. We'll be interested to see what happens with this back-to-back too as they take on the Clippers tonight and tomorrow night. We're recording this on Wednesday. Before we turn our attention to what's ahead, though, the trade deadline expires in 24 hours. The Spurs haven't made a move. Do you guys see anything changing before that deadline hits? I know, Evan, you're shocked. What do you think?
That's my wow face. No. As I said last week, I should have stuck to my guns against Woj when I said the LaMarcus Aldridge buyout was coming. I didn't. People are going to complain like, oh, they held on to LaMarcus too long, yada, yada, yada. I'm sorry. Like, hindsight's always 20/20. I personally don't think the Spurs should have gave up on LaMarcus last year. Especially if you're building for the future, especially because we thought that LaMarcus found something with shooting threes, and that was a big asset. So, you had him for a year. It was worth it to bring him back for a year. I don't think any team this goes back to the fact that everybody will crap all over LaMarcus Aldridge, yet they all expect major things in return for LaMarcus Aldridge. Don't get it. So just do the buyout, get some money back. As I said, the Holts do not want to go over that luxury tax. So even the money working out, even though that's super difficult, it's even more difficult because the Spurs are right up on that tax line, meaning they can't even take back more than like $1 million to make it work because that's going to bring them over the tax line. So I think the buyout probably is the best route for LaMarcus. As for all the other reports we've heard, I cannot tell you how many times we've heard that DeMar DeRozan does not want to return to San Antonio. I cannot tell you how many times we have asked DeMar DeRozan about these reports, and he said, if they do not come from my mouth, do not listen to them. That's not saying that he's going to return next year. I'm just telling you that these reports most likely come from executives or agents trying to push things in their direction. That's just my feel. I do also feel like DeMar DeRozan does not want to return to San Antonio, not because he doesn't like playing for the Spurs, not because he doesn't like playing for Pop. I personally think that for his own personal life, he would like to see if he can get to a different location. Having said that, no team is going to offer DeMar DeRozan the ability to be DeMar DeRozan like the Spurs. He is an integral part of the offense and what they do here. And I don't think another team is going to give him the keys of the car. So as long as DeMar is okay being third fiddle on a championship caliber team, then that's fine. If he wants to take a pay cut to do that, that's also fine. But I still think the most money would come from the Spurs. I still think the best role from any NBA team would most likely come from the Spurs. So, to me, if you're not going to give me anything worthwhile for DeMar, I'm keeping him. If DeMar sat me down, if I'm Brian Wright, and he was like, look, I am not returning next year. 1,010%, I am out. Then I would be willing to at least get 80 cents on the dollar. But, again, DeMar helps you get to the playoffs this year, and playoff experience is important. So, same thing with Rudy. You're not going to get anything massive for Rudy. And Rudy, I don't care what people want to say about the eye test. Like, the numbers and everything that I see is Rudy is still one of the best plus-minuses on the team. Now, I don't think Rudy should start, and I don't think Rudy should necessarily close either. But he has a really good role on the Spurs. He's very successful. And whether he's playing with guys who make him better than what he is, I don't want to hear it because that's what teams are. Like, stop telling me that, like, oh, Rudy's only good because he plays with Yak and DeJounte and Derek and different rotations and yada, yada, yada. Like, he's on a team. Like, I'm sorry. He plays with those guys, and he consistently plays with those guys. So nobody's asking him to play 1-on-5. Nobody's asking him to play in lineups without those guys. He's super effective in those lineups. So why are we creating hypotheticals of where he's not going to play in those lineups, of where he's going to be starting? Like, it just – I get it. Like, he's not a sexy player anymore. His skill set is a depreciating value in the NBA. But he works for this year. For the rest of this year, I like him. Thank you for your services. Go chase a title somewhere else after the year. But I'm not trading him for peanuts.
He's lettuce, right? On its own, it's lettuce. The most bland, kind of boring food. You put lettuce on a hamburger, now you're talking. You got cheese, you got the meat, you got the ketchup on you.
That reminds me, Jackson, of a good food metaphor from our friend Bill Taylor, who was explaining to viewers the difference between a thunderstorm watch and thunderstorm warning. And a watch is like you got all the ingredients for cupcakes, right? You got the eggs and the flour and the frosting and all of that and the oven, and your kitchen is all set up. And then a warning is like it's actually happening. Like the baking process has commenced. They're in the oven. And it seems like the Spurs have all of the ingredients for a really good team. And sometimes it feels like they're cooking a little bit. But we haven't seen them do it with all the right ingredients. First of all, they haven't had all the ingredients healthy at the same time for a lot of this season. And I think because of that, in a large part, they've struggled to put it together consistently.
Yeah, I mean, right now the Spurs sit in 7th seed, in the 7th spot in the West. They're half a game out of the 8th spot. Tonight they play the Clippers. The Mavericks are the 8th seed, play the Wolves. There's a decent chance to wake up in the morning and those spots have switched. But does that mean that the Spurs need to fire sell, to get rid of DeMar, to go ahead and tank for the year? No, because even as the 8th seed in the West, and after that, I mean, after the 8th seed, the Western Conference kind of tanks a little bit. Curry's missing a few more weeks now with this injury. Warriors aren't going to be, kind of challenging for a while. You still want to make the hunt. You still want to try to get into the playoffs at this point in time because the young guys need the experience. Another year of getting Keldon. I mean, Keldon hasn't been in the playoffs yet. Get him some playoff experience. Show him how the game changes, as the rotations tighten. That'll be helpful. Get Devin Vassell shooting in a playoff game. This is all stuff that's building for the future. So don't sell DeMar and try to get a top seed or try to get a top pick in the playoffs. I mean, you're not going to get that a top pick in the draft coming up because that's not what DeMar is worth to a lot of teams. But
I mean, here's my thing. This is why I don't overreact to losses. Look, it sucked losing to the Hornets. I get it. I'm not saying like you should be happy that it happened. Should the Spurs win that game on paper? Yeah, they should. But I can go through every single NBA team of games that they lose, and it's going to happen at least 5 to 6 times a year. And the Hornets isn't even like that bad of a loss in the context of watching the game. It was a really good game. But again, the Spurs points differential is nearly top 10. The Spurs defense is nearly top 5. Their offense is mediocre. And when you have a mediocre offense, you're going to have nights where you're just stinking, where the ball is not going in the hoop. And that's what you kind of had with the Hornets because a few players just didn't have it. But overall, they're fine. Like they're, at least when I look at their numbers and everything I'm seeing, like they're a playoff team. They're going to be in the playoffs. So there's no need to just trade people for 20 cents on the dollar just because you need to get something. Because that something is not going to mean anything come next year or in the future. Like it just doesn't. Second round picks don't mean diddly you know what in the NBA. They just don't. And teams like the Spurs might be able to take advantage of them from time to time, but they don't need to trade for them, because the odds of the second round pick actually becoming something is fairly slim, probability speaking. Not saying it doesn't happen, just saying probabilities are the second round pick is not going to materialize. So, if somebody wants to throw a first round pick out there, I'm very willing to listen and pull trigger. Are many teams going to do that?
Yeah.
I don't think so. And I still think we're in a time period where teams don't want to help out the Spurs, that the Spurs know what they're doing better than you know what you're doing, and they're going to have that stank on them for a long time, which is why they develop the crap out of players, and they're really successful at doing it.
Big body.
In case you need a reminder, is the Spurs know what they're doing more than other teams
They
know.
especially know what they're doing with the 29th overall pick.
There you go. Another name that kind of cropped up this week in cropped. It cropped up in trade rumors this week was Trey Lyles. Tom, I know you're a little higher on Trey and what he's meant to the Spurs team and what he could mean to the Spurs team. What did you think of the name kind of appearing? And would you part ways with Trey if he's a restricted free agent this offseason? He could leave the Spurs. Is it worth trying to get something for that?
I mean, it makes sense from probably his and his agent's perspective of, okay, we had a good thing going here last year, and then all of a sudden now I can't find minutes. What's the deal? I could understand him wanting to see if there's another team that could use his skill set before he's, a free agent again. because he wants to get reps and he wants to get minutes and playing time and tape out there. That's like, hey, I'm actually a pretty good NBA player, and he is. I think that down the stretch in the rest of this year, the Spurs are going to need him, just for depth, for big man depth, especially with LaMarcus Aldridge not with the team. We talked about the effect of that, and will we see more of Trey Lyles? Will we see more of Luka Šamanić? And really, we've seen more of Drew Eubanks, which, love Drew. We love Drew on the pod here, but definitely would like to see a little bit more of those other guys just so the Spurs can gauge where they're at, in their development and in terms of what they can bring to an NBA team. So I think moving forward, we'll see a little bit if they're trying to make any moves in that regard. But we saw in the Philly game, that was kind of the last time we saw any real extended Trey Lyles minutes, and he started that game and guarded Ben Simmons for a little bit, but didn't really do much else. So yeah, I don't know where they're at with Trey Lyles. I think if anybody wants to, I think the Spurs would probably like to keep him because he's cheap. And if they can just have him as depth for the rest of the year, that would be great for them. He and his agent probably wouldn't mind if there was somebody who was like, hey, we could use a stretch four who can, sometimes guard multiple positions. What's Trey Lyles doing?
So trade deadline, less than 24 hours away. We think the Spurs are going to stay put across the board, right, guys? I don't see them parting with any of these guys.
The
one with
same
best
thing every year.
Yeah. And Spurs fans on Twitter and Reddit and wherever platforms they find.
Big body.
I accidentally closed the clip. I can't play it right now, but I'll open it back up here.
You closed it so that you couldn't go back to it.
Yeah, it was enough. I think about 5 times it was pushing the limits.
Reddit, so I had to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, so fans on social media might express a little disappointment that it was a buyout for Aldridge and not a trade, that we couldn't get any pieces. We let him go for nothing. We took on that contract. It's an expense, the buying out a contract is not fun for teams to do because they take on expenses. That kind of locks you up for the rest of the year in terms of what you can do in the markets and things like that. But a buyout means that you're not taking on mediocre long-term contracts. A lot of the players we saw mentioned from the Heat eat up cap space next year, right? Eat up cap space in the future. Next year, the Spurs are one of 3 teams with $40 million or more in cap space to use. That's incredibly valuable. With the young team you have, that means you can go out and be competitive in the market. I'm not saying you're going to go out and sign the Giannis Antetokounmpos or whomever might be the biggest name in the free agent pool next year. Honestly, the biggest name in the free agent pool next year might be DeMar DeRozan. We'll see. But that means you might be able to compete for rotational guys. We've seen the depth in the front court has been kind of something we've talked about on this podcast. Go out and sign one of those top tier rotational players in that position with the money you have. Trading Aldridge might seem like the right move in the short term to get someone else, but it locks up your cap room if you're taking on these contracts that have been floated out there. So
yeah, and that's that was my thing that I said a while back too. Is trading a Trey Lyles is whatever. He costs nothing. You can make that money work, and you can take back a salary, put him on the bench, and whatever. You can even cut the dude, whatever. You can take back a year. But LaMarcus is so much money, it's way more complicated to make the money work and the years. So I agree. You can't be trading. I don't care if you get an asset. I don't want to lock up any cap space in the future, because if they want to ball out and get John Collins, they want to put a really good offer out to Lauri Markkanen. Those are kind of the guys that I think the Spurs are looking at, So when you're San Antonio, you need a bit more dough. You're not going to get guys on the cheap. You're naturally going to overpay a little bit. I'm sorry, that's just the way that it is. When you're San Antonio, you gotta fork up a little bit more money to say, hey, there's no way that you can turn down this offer. I was kind of interested to see if Brian Wright would get creative and try to sign some guys now and treat this a little bit as free agency for the offseason and make something happen. But but it doesn't look like that's going to be the route. But there are tons of options and abilities to go in the offseason. And it's so exciting because the core of this team is there. And I think Brian Wright has the ability to tip the scales and alter this roster into a championship contender with the right pieces. And I truly mean that. Like, this squad is going to be way more competitive, fighting for a championship earlier than what people think. So, and I brought up the thing last year that even if they strike out in free agency, they can always pay guys. They can front load a bunch of contracts, rework deals with DeJounte, Derek, pay them more up front so that they clear that room later. And then when they are more successful, try to attack in free agency again at a later date.
Yeah, I think that, when you look at the Aldridge situation, I don't think the trade market is going to be great for him because of that. Because of that contract. I mean, we've just seen that teams. There are a few teams that have the money to make it work in a 2-team deal. Reportedly, there are offers out there for him, but they would all involve the Spurs taking on long-term contracts. So, a buyout by definition is not great. Not a great reflection on the GM who signed that deal, right? Because that's an acknowledgement that, like, okay, we've reached an impasse here, either because of play or because of something else. This is not working. But you don't want to then go compound that mistake by, making another one. So I think if the Spurs are to buy Aldridge out, it's not my money, not any of the fans' money, really. They'll still have their cap space moving forward, and I mean they'll have clarity, right? We hear a lot of complaints, not just that they aren't doing anything, but because they aren't doing anything, I don't know what they're doing. That's something that I hear a lot of from Spurs fans, and it's like, well, the path that they've laid out for themselves is pretty clear, but it's not the most out there, crazy, sexy thing, but one foot in front of the other.
Is the biggest front office thing they've done this season kind of acknowledging that Aldridge, that it's time to move on from Aldridge, and then giving all those minutes, giving the role to Pirtle? That counts. That counts as something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if want to involve Pop in the front office decisions, which is fair. I mean, kind of is the same deal. But yeah, I think that the recognition that it's not working. And we've said it on this podcast a million times, and we're going to, regurgitate this a million times over. LaMarcus Aldridge is not a defensive wizard. The legs are gone. He can still provide a lot of offensive help. But San Antonio's bread and butter, when they hit their peak, is they are going to lock you up. They win games by their defense. That's a tale as old as time with this organization. And for them to be successful in the present and in the future, they need people who can provide defense. And you can allow a guy like DeMar DeRozan to be on the team because he's such an offensive impact and is so versatile on that side of the floor that you can live with the bad defense and hide him a little bit. But you can't have him and LaMarcus. You can't have two people like that because then the dam is broken.
Yeah. What if he does the Blake Griffin special and, looks super washed, gets bought out of his big contract, and then once he goes to a contender, all of a sudden his legs work again? I think that would leave Spurs fans feeling a little sour.
Spurs fans already hate LaMarcus, so I don't know what else they're going to do to the general population of Spurs fans, I should say.
I think a lot of them have proper respect for him.
Yeah, I know. A lot of them do.
Spurs fans' worst nightmare.
I would say I think it's like 60-40 at best of people, 60% being like, I don't like LaMarcus from Spurs Twitter.
I think Spurs fans' worst nightmare is come this summer when Aldridge has been bought up by the Clippers and Leonard and Aldridge win a championship together for Los Angeles, right? That sounds like a nightmare scenario. There's a lot of names out there for Aldridge. He'll have his pick, I guess, of where he wants to go once he does get bought out. But yeah, there's probably a decent chance that he goes to a contender, and we'll see him on a deep run in the playoffs. And whether or not he looks great or not, whether he can make the court, we'll see. So
I would kind of fade. I still think it's going to be a little bit. At least the difference with Pau Gasol was that he didn't really provide anything offensively at that point in his career either. LaMarcus, you can stick somewhere, but his teammates are going to have to work overtime to make sure that he's not a liability on the court defensively. And I don't think you can hide him. The book is out on him. So don't post him up, don't go downhill on him, and then you're pretty much golden.
So we've got 2 nights of Kawhi Leonard ahead of us as we go to the back-to-back with the Clippers. Is this the longest stretch of time you think Kawhi spent in San Antonio since that trade?
It's got to be.
Right?
Yeah.
And Spurs fans will be in the building, and I'm sure that even in capacity, you might hear some booing gone his way. Is there anything that stands out to you, Tom, on the matchup there? Maybe another chance to see Keldon match up against Kawhi or anything like that? I know the Clippers are also without Patrick Beverley tonight, too, and Serge Ibaka.
And Serge Ibaka, yep.
Yeah, I mean, anytime Keldon and Kawhi play each other, it's going to be appointment television for Spurs fans. If that was the pick that was part of that trade for Kawhi became Keldon Johnson. So, and especially because he said coming into the league that, that was one of the guys that he really looked up to and modeled his game after. Anytime those two face off, I'm watching. And it's going to be a fun time.
It's straight out of Star Wars, right? You had Anakin Skywalker. He turns the dark side. Suddenly, Luke's going up against him, and those are some great bouts. You don't want to miss any of those. But
yeah, no, I mean he says he doesn't care who he's playing against, and I kind of believe him, but I only believe him as much as I can believe him on that.
Yes, you can only believe him as much as you want to believe him.
Right, but you don't care, but you care a little. Like I feel like everybody would care a little bit if they were playing against, players of that caliber. So, not that he needs a cause to bring energy. He's never been deficient in that area. So, just excited to watch that, and the team defense with Jakob Poeltl at the helm now is better than the one that played against this Clippers team earlier in the season. So excited to watch that as well.
For sure.
Yeah, this is an interesting stretch to play the Clippers in because, first off, for the Clippers, it's weird to play the Spurs in the sense that you have a 13-game stretch where 11 of those games are home, and these are the only 2 road games. Weird. So I think they're not going to be loving this random trip in the middle of their week. 2, kind of a good time to play the Clippers. In their last 15 games, they're 7-8. They finally put together back-to-back wins for the first time in a month. So, and not to mention, the Clippers have gone through like 5 or 6 of these back-to-back-ish type of series, whether it's an actual back-to-back or playing that team, again with a rest day. And they've only swept the Thunder very early in the season. They split every other series. So the mentality here is I expect the Spurs to win 1. And I think that's really, as a Spurs fan, that's all you're asking for, right? Split the series. You would definitely love to win the front end because we know how the second babas go. Usually, we don't know which one, but one's going to suck. Is it going to be today? Is it going to be tomorrow? Who knows? That's the fun of a Sega Baba.
Oh, man. Anything else looking ahead that you guys want to call out as this homestand continues?
I mean, it was, frustrating loss against Charlotte, these 2 tough games against the Clippers, but the rest of these games on the homestand, Chicago, Sacramento, Atlanta, Indiana, Cleveland, like those are 6 winnable games. And so, even if things don't go well these next two, I'm not hitting the panic button quite yet.
Yeah, I think the mark. I think the mark for me going into this homestand was at minimum 6-3. That's kind of why that Charlotte loss hurts, because I think that's like the buffer loss that you had. Like, I'm not expecting you to go 9-0 here, and going into this, I know you're going to lose at least one Clippers game, so that's 1 L. And then I knew you're going to stumble. You're probably going to lose one of the Kings games too, because it's very tough to beat the same opponent twice. Just across the league, very rarely have teams been sweeping other teams. It's always been a split. Like the majority of the time, it's been a split. So, I had them pegged for 3 losses during this stretch, and that they're gonna have to really take care of business. And Atlanta's playing better. Indiana's always a tough team. It's but no excuses. I mean, you're home for a 9-game stretch. You have to take care of business. So my biggest point of emphasis is to just take one from the Clippers and then go on a run and make it happen. And there's going to be a stinker somewhere in the middle there. But this is a pivotal point in the Spurs season, because they really need to kind of catch up to the Blazers, who they still, like, I don't know how the Blazers keep winning games. They're like, and I do, because I don't know if you guys have ever looked at Damian Lillard's clutch statistics. I know the clutch stats start at 5 minutes, but I actually reduced it down to 2, because 2 is a lot more fun. And his percentages are wild. This guy does not miss in the last 2 minutes of a game. So, he's DeMar DeRozan's a pretty good closer, but Lillard and what he's doing for the Blazers, man, that team should not be where it is. Yeah. Like he is for sure an MVP candidate.
And you have to contend with that when trying to keep up in the Western Conference. Plus, Dallas has been coming on since the All-Star break. They looked great. So you got that coming up on the wings there. You're sandwiched in the Western Conference, which is always going to be tough. As Tom mentioned, I think this is probably the easiest stretch of games left for the Spurs in terms of winnability. This after the Clippers, that's
the end of the season is rough, so they better get these wins.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to any of these games in person, watch Keldon Johnson. I mean, we've talked about it plenty today. He brings energy. He's a lot of fun. I wish I could see him in person at some point in time, because I just want to hear the volume he brings. It comes through on the TV. His primal screams, if you will, on the court there. I want to hear how electric he is in the building.
I'm sure in a mostly empty AT&T Center, it's just like echoing off the walls. Like you can hear him all the way up top. Just, ah!
I mean, before I guess the end of March or end of February, they started letting fans back in the stands. Before that, he'd only played 8 total minutes in front of Spurs fans. So this is really the first look Spurs fans get to see him in person, and it's a small group, but that's a group.
By the way, after this homestand, the Spurs have a total of 7 home games. That's it.
So cherish it.
All right, as long as you can, cherish it.
Oh, and speaking of cherishing it, Evan Klosky, we are cherishing every minute we get with you. You made the announcement today on your Twitter that Tampa Bay is calling your name, calling you up to the big leagues as a sports director there for WTSP 10 Tampa. We're going to miss you here in the pod, man. It's been a lot of fun having you here in San Antonio and in the podcast. Of course, you get to be a Spurs fan now on Twitter.
Right. That's right. Now I get to give you guys.
There you go. Yeah. Gotta edit that out, I guess.
Is it because I was bad? Did I? Is it my fault?
Thomas Wilson standing in the empty living room saying, "Why don't you want me, man?"
Yeah, I'll take it back, man. I didn't mean it. No, I'll give you more airtime.
My evil plan to force Evan out is fine. Like, I didn't think it would happen this quickly, you know? I always knew there was only room for one of us loudmouth Long Islanders on here, but I'm I'm still sad that this era has to come to an end, man. We're gonna miss you terribly.
Yeah, and I'm super sad to leave this leave this city. I'm super sad I'm not going to see the Spurs kind of blossom into that beautiful flower that we've been watching grow over these past 3 years. Like my entire time here has been the transitional phase. My first week on the job was the Kawhi trade, and sort of my end time here is kind of this last season where I think the transition is finally going to be complete. After this year, you're finally going to see what Brian Wright and that entire front office, including Pop, has been trying to figure out ever since the Kawhi Leonard deal blew up the entire 5-year plan for this group. So, I'm going to be able to watch it from afar. I'm going to be able to listen.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'll still see it. You'll just be in Florida.
No, I know, but I'm not going to be a part of it. That there's a sense of pride that comes with being part of the community during those moments. And as I said, I have the utmost confidence in where this organization is going. I have the utmost confidence in where this podcast is going. This is just kind of the start for us. And you two are the heads of the snake. So. I'm going to be gone, but the pod's going to live on, and I cannot wait to kind of see the things where this podcast is going to progress, because I know that evil genius in Tom Petrini has some ideas going.
Sorry, I'm just laughing about which part of the snake you are. Do snakes have those?
You don't want to know where I am on the snake.
Well,
I'm not a snake biologist.
I'm in your head, man. I'm in your head.
I have one last note to leave you on here, Evan. Just one last thing here to kind of.
Big body.
Oh man, I've had that on loop all day. It's never leaving my head. Speaking of head rent free,
I know it's coming, and I'm still laughing. It's so dumb. It's so awesome at the same time.
Well, that's words they also use to describe at Real Time Petrini's, where you can find. That's Tom Petrini. He's on Twitter at Real Time Petrini. Evan Klosky, you can find him at Evan Klosky. And, of course, follow the Big Fun Pod at Big Fun Pod. I'm Jackson Floyd at Jackson Kins 5. And, of course, we are the Big Fun Pod, Kins 5's the Spurs podcast. And Kins 5, of course, is the official station of the San Antonio Spurs. Next week, I think we're going to do a very special Evan Klosky grab bag episode. Clear the lane, clear the paint, whatever he wants to talk about, let him bring it to the horn. So.
Yeah,
man, we really have to give him extra special license to not shut up. Oh yeah, God,
that's what's gonna happen, and you got to deal with it. I don't even care. I don't even feel bad. Don't even feel bad one bit.
We may top. We hit Avengers Endgame runtime in the past. This might be Snyder Cut Justice League.
and you know what? I don't know how we're gonna do it, but this next podcast is gonna be about an hour and a half of just panning shots.
Slow motion. Slow motion. So. All right, we'll see you guys next time.